Okay. Um, I think it's time we get started with this great presentation that we have scheduled for you today. I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for being present. We'll also be recording this for anyone that can't make it, and we'll also be translating it to Spanish so that we can share it with the rest of our network. I'm going to repeat that in Spanish just in case we have any Spanish speakers on. Quería tomar este tiempo para agradecerles a todos que están acá con nosotros hoy para la presentación de Rodrigo. Esta charla va a ser en inglés, pero la estamos grabando y la vamos a traducir y después vamos a compartir eso con ustedes por si hay alguien que solo habla español. De todas maneras, muchísimas gracias por estar acá con nosotros hoy. So now that we've got, a good amount of people in, thank you so much for everyone being so patient and waiting until the start time. We had some early birds that saw some behind the scenes. I wanted to thank you, Rodrigo, for being here as our speaker for our second Tech Talk that we've started. Thank you so much. I met Rodrigo back in November in the Bahamas at a conference. And, he's Venezuelan, I'm Colombian, we're sister countries, and we got along so well. I'm so excited that we're able to hold this space for him today. I also wanted to thank BGCI, the Botanic Gardens Conservation International organization, for supporting us in all of our different initiatives, for supporting us as the Caribbean and Central American Botanic Garden Network. I am your host today. My name is Lena Ramirez. I work for Naples Botanical Garden, but I am also the coordinator for the network. So we have some exciting things coming down the line, and thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey. Some ground rules: if you're not speaking, please mute your audio so that we can have undivided attention. For the beginning of our presentation, Rodrigo will be the only one really speaking, so please mute while he's presenting so we can show him that respect. At the very end, we'll have a question and answer session where you can unmute when you're ready to ask a question. We ask that you use the hand raising feature. That way we're not having people talk over each other. So we'll call out your name when we're ready for your question. You can unmute and ask it. If you don't have the capability to unmute and speak a question, you might be in a noisy environment. You can also type out your question and we'll be able to read it in the chat and ask Rodrigo ourselves. With that, I would like to set the stage for Chad, who will give us a beautiful introduction to Rodrigo and his amazing work.
Well, thank you, Lena, and thank you again. I just want to give a shout out to BGCI. Thank you for your support for this Caribbean and Central American Botanical Garden Network. And thank you to everybody for joining us from around the region. If you're familiar with garden search and plant search, two of the many tools that BGCI has developed to help build capacity in our region, garden search and plant search are two really important tools that have a lot of data associated with them. And it's really important for part of our strategy to get those updated. So just a heads up, we will be reaching out to all of you who are a part of the Caribbean and Central American Botanic Garden Network to update that information. But if you're ready now to update that, please reach out to Lena or myself. And yeah, we're ready to help you get that information put in there. That'll help us build more capacity around the region. So thank you. Our speaker for today is Rodrigo de Sousa Hernandez, and he's the Tropical Forest Program Manager at Osa Conservation, a non-governmental organization based in Costa Rica. And Rodrigo was with us at the recent Network Congress in Eleuthera, Bahamas. Rodrigo is a Venezuelan agronomist. He graduated from the Central University of Venezuela. He earned his master's degree of science in agricultural and resource economics from UC Davis in California, USA, and a master's in arts in environment, development, and peace from the UN-mandated University for Peace in San Jose, Costa Rica. He brings over 20 years of experience in the design, execution, and monitoring of landscape projects, soil stabilization, and we heard a lot about that at our Congress, erosion prevention, reforestation, and forest restoration in both Venezuela and Costa Rica. For the past 3 years, he's dedicated himself to community outreach and forest restoration projects in several sites of the Coto Brus in Buenos Aires and the Osa regions of the southwestern Costa Rica. And through these projects, Rodrigo leads agricultural stability, tree restoration, and connectivity between existing forest patches through an agricultural landscape, and research and protection of rare and endangered tree species. His presentation today, the AmistOsa Restoration Model, restoring connectivity through an altitudinal gradient in southern Costa Rica, is really important. It includes work towards several of the primary objectives and targets of the plant conservation strategy for the greater Caribbean region. That was the strategy that we helped to all develop at our Congress in Eleuthera just a few short months ago. And his work, it really addresses so many of those objectives and targets. I think personally that this acts as a great guide for many of us as we do our work in the region to conserve plants. And it helps us all kind of form a roadmap on how we as individuals in our own gardens can help to meet the objectives of this next decade's strategy. So with that, I'll turn things over to Rodrigo. Thank you. We're excited for this.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon to all. Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm going to start sharing my screen and talk about the work we do. Is it all right? Cool. So first, I want to talk about the name Amistosa, which in Spanish is friendly for female gender. Is because it's a work done between the Amistad International Park and the Osa Peninsula in southwestern Costa Rica. And that's why it has that name. So we are trying to restore not only ecological connectivity, but also social connectivity, agricultural connectivity, community connectivity, because those things should go together in order to be successful in restoration. So Chad did a great work presenting me. I've been living in Costa Rica for the past 5.5 years. I never thought I would be living in this part of the world, and well, things happen, and I'm super excited to be part of this team and part of this project. I always tell my friends that one of the things I love the most about this is that we're actually doing something good for others. It's not only we're saying it, but we're doing it. So I'm really proud of my team and the people we work with in the region. So let's get started with a little context. So for most of you, Costa Rica in your minds is a success story about especially forest conservation and forest regeneration. And as we can see from those charts you see there, which are the Costa Rican official statistics, yes, forest has made an incredible comeback in Costa Rica from 21% in '87 to almost 60% today. But always keep in mind that part of that forest includes timber plantations. So it's not only restoration, but it's also timber plantations and secondary forest. But we need to know the local realities in order to create a successful restoration program. So yes, Costa Rica as a whole did really well in these last 3 decades. But let's see what happened in the southwest of Costa Rica. So there you see the Osa Peninsula and the Golfo Dulce. The blue color represents an increase in biomass, and the red color represents a decrease in biomass. So these are taken from a satellite. So these are very accurate measurements, and they reflect what's happening with the vegetation. So if it's blue, then you can infer there is more trees and more forest. And if it's red, then it's the opposite. So in this region, in this sub-region of the southwest of Costa Rica, yes, the tendency it's positive. It's blue or white, which is no change. If we look up at La Amistad International Park, the dominant color is white because this was a protected area. This is a protected area. So all the primary forests there were protected, so they have stayed. So also the tendency is positive. But if we look in the middle, it's clearly a different reality. The red color really dominates this agricultural landscape. it's really important to understand the history of a place in order to think about restoration. So what happened there wasn't that people are bad or people made bad choices. It was just a price change in a commodity, which is coffee. And it wasn't caused by Costa Rica. It was caused by Brazil in the 80s, entered the market, the prices dropped. So all the farmers were obliged to cut down the coffee bushes, which normally host more trees and more biomass, and change to pasture. So it's not a bad decision. It's the decision they make based on their reality. So that's really important to understand. So that's the region where we're working, where we're doing our project. That's how our project was born. We saw that there were many protected areas with good forest cover, with increasing forest cover, with wildlife movement. But then there was this area in the middle where the tendency was the opposite. So in order for biodiversity to be protected, both for plants and animals, you need a good connectivity. So that's how a project, Reach to Reef Restoration Network, was born. The idea is to connect all those protected areas you see in the map. So this project is only almost 3 years old. We started from zero, and now you can see all those green dots are farms we're working with. We're working in restoration, we're working in seed collection, we're working agricultural sustainable practices. Then the colored dots you see here, 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 and here, and here are our nurseries. One of the biggest challenges when you're doing restoration in the tropics is that unlike the Northern Hemisphere where you, with 10 or 12 species, you're good to go, here you need to have at least 100 or 150 to have something somewhat close to what nature does. So this is, as you can see from this big altitudinal gradient down here, a very diverse area. Even though it's a small corner of the world, it hosts around 3% of the world's biodiversity. So that's why this project is so important. And then finally, these dotted lines you see here are the least cost paths, because when you're doing work over a huge area, then you need to focus, okay, where should I put more effort? Because with 1 hectare of restoration, I can connect more forests, so then I have a bigger impact in nature. So this is our regional context. As I was saying, you need to have a strong nursery inventory in order to do good restoration. We're not planting trees native to Costa Rica. We're planting trees native to this region of Costa Rica. There are many trees that are native to other parts of Costa Rica. We don't plant them. And that's very important because if you're restoring, you're trying to really imitate what nature does. So in some of our farms, we plant different species because native trees can be from the highlands or from the lowlands. And this shows that last year, even though we planted almost 100,000 trees, we were able to keep our inventory at around 100,000 trees of around 220 species. For each restoration project, we plant no less than 30 different species. So let's talk about our restoration model. This is a model that has been thought after doing field work, because I think it's really important theoretical knowledge, but then when you do work in the field, then you start learning those key aspects of the work you do. So restoration has 2 components. The first one is the biological component. So the biological component includes primary forest conservation. So if we come to a farm and it has primary forest, the target is, of course, to preserve that forest because that's a rare jewel. Then we encounter also secondary forest. So we do a lot of secondary forest enrichment. And this is the part where we mostly use the rare and endangered trees. Then we want to conserve or create crossings for wildlife. So then we see the farm from up the space, and then we see, okay, these are the forest patches. How can we how could be the best way to connect these forest patches in order for wildlife to move? Keep in mind, we are not working on protected areas. We are working on private farmland. And that's key to remember at every tape you do when you are designing this. Then, of course, water bodies are natural corridors, so we wanted to preserve and enhance the role in that. And lastly, we want to increase forest cover focus on ecological connectivity. It's not only planting trees, but it's planting trees with a scientific knowledge. We do a mix in order to favor the wildlife that we know is present there. In our organization, we have a whole team dedicated to wildlife monitoring. So that's a very useful information we use for our restoration project. Now let's talk about our socio-productive component. As I was saying, you can do a lot of biological connectivity, but if you don't work with the communities and the farmers are your on-the-ground allies, then restoration doesn't have a lot of future. So in this component, we work in, like, we go to a farm, they do something, let's say cattle ranching. So we want to improve their production models to make it more sustainable and make it more biodiversity friendly. They will still have cows, but then it will have a lesser impact in the environment. We always foster farm diversification. This is really important, especially when we're thinking about climate change and farm resilience. Without diversification, then farmers are exposed to change in market prices. As we saw in our first slides, those farmers only planted coffee, so they were very exposed to changes in that price commodity. We want to empower producers. It's not only we tell them what to do, we give them the tools and we do workshops. Last year, we did a workshop on vanilla, a workshop on timber. This year, we're going to do a workshop on cocoa. So the idea is, yes, we want to foster diversification, but we want to train farmers on how to do it. We, of course, stimulate the decrease or better use of agrochemicals. Agrochemicals, sometimes you need to have them, you need to use them, but we want to change the production model into a more environmentally friendly one. A new mechanism we are developing, it's financing support for sustainable production technologies. Sometimes adopting new technologies is expensive, and sometimes, and most of the times, farmers don't have access to credit. So it's important they have funds in order to diversify and improve their farms. And when we design restoration areas at the farm level, we not only decide what goes where, but producers, communities are an active part of this design. So sometimes we did a design and then we increase the restored areas because the farmer wanted us to. Or they also get involved in the species selections because maybe there are some trees that they like. And that's really important to understand that we are just passing by. The farmer is staying in that property we are planting trees at. So those were our restoration goals of farmlands. So the biological component and the socioeconomic component, we have several types of restoration. The first one and the most important one for farmers are water springs. Water springs are really good. If you preserve them, then you have a more stable influx of water through the dry and the wet season, which for cattle ranches is a key thing. Cows, of course, need to drink. And then for agricultural landscapes, then you have water for irrigation systems. Here in all the pictures you're gonna see is our actual working farm. So here you see, it's a really, really, really small patch around this very small lagoon. But just by doing this, the hydrological cycle here changed, and we saw a big improvement in only 6 months. This is a very degraded farm, as you can see. So the idea is to start working bit by bit to preserve water springs. The second restoration type we do, as I was saying earlier, riparian corridors are a key aspect when you're restoring a landscape like the place we're working at. Rains a lot, so there are a lot of rivers and streams. So, and most farmers like to have trees near the rivers. So here you see, this is how we work. The strips can be from 10 to 30 meters wide. And then the species selections we use for each one of these restoration types, we'll talk about it later. It's a different mix because we have different needs and different realities. The third type of restoration we do, and I was talking with Chad earlier about this, is degraded and eroded land. Of course, abusing the land produces these signs that you see here. So normally this is seen at cattle ranchers. ranches that are badly managed. So what we want to do is set aside this land from pastures and plant it with trees. And also we can plant forages that can serve as a food source for cows, but then cows won't be able to enter these areas. This is the patrimony of the farmer, the soil. So if the soil is degraded, eroded, or there is a mass movement, he or she is going to be losing money. Then I was talking earlier about mass movement, so that's really key, protecting agricultural land. So here we have 4 different cases. The one you see here at the bottom, this is a local road, and there was a big hurricane 2 years ago, so there was a big landslide. So we are not only restoring this, protecting this agricultural land, but we're also protecting a local communication, local transportation. So it's like a win-win situation. Up here, it's a coffee farm where the farmer has abused the use of herbicides. So the soil has no protection, and that's affecting the coffee crop. So that's how we are restoring this land. And then in these 2, it's just a mass movement caused by a lot of rain, which is very common in this region. And then as I was saying, we restore with the farmer. We don't tell the farmer what to do. The farmer is part of the process. So I wanted to show the names of actually farmers we work with. So in the case of Pablo, he's planting vanilla. So these trees are for shading the vanilla. In the case of Jason, is the biggest project so far, 8 hectares, so over 8,000 trees. He wants to do urban development, but like 1 house per hectares. But first, he wants to create a forest. Then with Hipólito, he wanted just to reforest the whole farm and transform it into a conservation area. And Pablo Cascante wanted to connect this forest through this little strip to a forest that is here on the right, that it belongs to the son's farm. So as I was saying, these are really key factors to take into account when you do restoration on private lands. And then here we can see forest enrichment. Fortunately, in this region, there are a lot of remaining primary and secondary forests. So that makes our work much easier. In forest enrichment, we focus on species that have a higher ecological value. We want to increase the biodiversity of these forest patches that you see. These were projects that were planted last year. So how is our restoration mix? Of course, we want to have pioneer species. This tree you see here is not even 2 years old. It's only like 1 year and 4 months since it was planted. And look at the size, it's over 3 meters high. So of course, here the problem is not the drought, it's not fires. The problem here is how aggressive the pastures are, because those pastures were designed to be aggressive so they can feed a lot of cows. So that's our big limitation here, because we want to foster natural regeneration, but with the pasture, that's impossible. So with these pioneer trees, the one you see in the middle is only 3 years old, and look at the size, it's over like 50 feet, so 20 meters high. And the one on the right is less than 2 years old since it was planted. So these are like what we call the nurse trees for the other trees that we plant together with them. Of course, when we are talking about degraded lands, this is the group that dominates, because these are very resistant trees that can endure very harsh conditions. The second group, which is in part pioneer, but it has an additional added value, are the legume trees that have the capacity of fixing air nitrogen into the soil. Here you can clearly see, this is a guava or Inga edulis tree, and you can see the different shade in the pasture here. That's not the shade, that's the nitrogen this tree is fixing. So of course, these are key species to restore degraded lands because they improve natural fertility, and at the same time, they are a food source for everyone, including humans. These fruits are delicious, and they are native, and there are like so many species of those. And as you can see, they can also endure flooding, which in the lowlands is our biggest problem. During the rainy season, most of the soil is flooded. The third group our target species. These are the species that depends on the project we wanna design or the farm's wishes and needs. So here in the middle, we have Terminalia amazonia, which is a timber tree that is very liked by farmers. Here is a sotacaballo, which is a tree really good for stabilizing soils and really good for bees. Here is a colpachi, a Crotonte unicaudatus, which is a really good trees for bees. And here we not only plant trees, but we also plant bushes and we also plant grasses. The grass you see here is called vetiver. It's perfect for soil stabilization. The root grows 4 meters, which is like 12 feet deep into the soil, and it can endure very harsh conditions. So we plant this together with trees when we need to do like big stabilization areas. And then the last, but the most important group are rare and endangered trees. So here we work with the Botanic group. They do a lot of expeditions, seed collections, tree identification, and then we germinate those seeds at our nurseries, and then we're able to put them on our restoration sites. They're also doing really well. What you see here on the right is a Quercus insignis, a type of oak that is native to Costa Rica. What you see on the left is a Ulmus mexicana, is the only elm outside North America and Europe and Asia. Here is the jewel of our rare trees, Pleodendron costarricensis. It's a living fossil. It was first named like in 2015, so very recent. And through our expeditions, we have learned how rare it is. There are only 7 of these trees in adult stage at the Osa Peninsula. So we planted over 100 of those last year. So this is a key component of our restoration program. But of course, you can do great work restoring, you can do a great work mixing the species, but without this, things go nowhere. And I think this is where most restoration projects fail. They do a great design, they do a great planting, but they never come back. And this is how we keep alive the relationship between our project and the farmers. So this is in a glance, the process of how do we do planting and maintenance. So first, we clearly mark all the areas we're gonna plant. We do it with the farmers, so they know where the border is gonna be and they know how big it's gonna be. Because one thing is they to see it in Google Earth, one thing, and different thing is them to see it at the farm. Once the areas are defined and approved by the farmers, we mark the areas with the stakes. We use bamboo stakes, which is an invasive species here. It's a Chinese bamboo. So it's cheap, it's biodegradable, it's super abundant, it's light. We use those not only to mark, to see where the trees are going to be planted, but very important, to count how many trees need to be brought. Because imagine a restoration site that you can only access by walk, and maybe it's half a mile away from the nearest road. And then the guys carry double the trees that are really needed. So that's really, really, really important. Then those stakes are also used to count mortality. Then we mark them with some like bright color ribbons. And then the next year we go and replant, and then we know how many trees are needed to be replanted. So once the planting sites are marked with the stakes, we remove all the grasses with a shovel, and at least that's it, the minimum diameter it should have. Then after clearing up the planting circle trees, the trees are brought to the field. The species come mixed in a basket. So we already mix all the species. We know that according to the restoration sites, which group of species should go there, and then it's super easy to distribute and plant. We do maintenance at least twice a year. We count mortality at the end of the dry season, which is April, and then we plant that mortality in May. So I wanted to show you how hard is this work, because one thing is saying it, one other thing is doing it. So here's a drone video taken by Rodrigo de Sousa, our Highlands coordinator, which I think really, really shows how difficult this work is. Each circle you see there is a tree we planted. That's the farm I was mentioning, that we planted 8,000 trees. So imagine doing 8,000 holes with a shovel. twice a year. And that's the only way we can guarantee those trees will surpass that very aggressive pasture on that very degraded land. So without our field crew, restoration work would be impossible. So that's the power of working as a team. Okay, so let's talk about our model farms. We talked about restoration. We talked about the biological component of restoration, the socioeconomic component of restoration. How do we do restoration? But restoration without improvements in agricultural productivity won't go anywhere. So that's why this is super important. So we have several model farms. The first one is silvopastoral systems, in which we mix pastures with trees. We have agroforestry systems, in which we mix several types of crops. We do crops under secondary forests. The problem with secondary forests is that they have a small economic value, so people tend to easily cut them again. If we plant crops that can grow under the secondary forest, then we can increase the economic value, and then the farmers will have a smaller incentive to cut down the forest. And then we also work in conservation, ecotourism, and greenhouse and development. These are farms that they just want to do these type of activities, which is becoming more and more popular. Costa Rica, of course, lives from ecotourism, so that's really important in this region. We also work with timber plantation blocks. And what I want to point out, sometimes a farm has one of those systems, but sometimes a farm can have all of these systems distributed in the landscape. So that depends on the farmer's wishes, the farmer's needs, the farmer's conditions. So it's a very fun process of designing and deciding what to do. So let's talk about silvopastoral systems. This is all that you're seeing are actual farms that we design. So this is the farm that is in the highlands around 3,000 feet high, so 1,300 meters high. These are pastures, and these remain pastures. We restore what you see in green, and in yellow is the live fence, which is also a great thing we can do in the tropics. We can have live posts, so that increases, of course, the number of trees at a farm. In this forest is the water spring that serves a community. So we are protecting the water quality of that spring. So it's like a win for the farmer, a win for the community, and a win for us, and a win for the environment as well. So we combine timber trees. See how amazing. These are so many timber trees, and look at the way these pastures look. Super healthy, super nutritious. So you can have cows grazing here, and you can also have all these trees that are timber trees that in the future can provide an additional income for the farmer. We have live fences, as I was saying, is one of the key tools we have to work on cattle ranches and make them more biodiversity friendly. These fences are good for animal crossings. They're good for birds nesting. They're good for squirrels nesting. So as you plant more and more live fences, then the farm becomes more biodiversity, and the farmer is keeping a good pasture here. And then in this picture down here, you can see a strip that was planted near the road. This is 30 meters wide. So the farmer is keeping the cattle here, and then we'll have like a green belt around it, which for climate change is also really good because it will protect the pastures in extreme weather, either it's drought or wet. The second technique we use in silvopastoral systems are what is called shade islands. To increase the productivity of cattle, cattle needs shade so they can feed and they can rest in a cool environment. And then we plant these trees that are the guavas that I was talking about earlier, legume trees, so they improve the soil, give shade to cattle. The pasture has more nutritious content. There is more carbon fixation in this farm. So that's at the end what we're looking for, adding up small pieces to get a great result. And then this is a key thing, paddock division. This was a technology that was created because some clever people look at what happened in nature. what happened in the big migrations in Africa. So those are really poor soils, very scarce rainfall, and yet it has pasture to feed millions of big animals years after years after year. So what happens there is that the animals just graze for 1 or 2 days and move on. So that's how this system was created. So you create, instead of having a 20-hectare paddock, which will look something like that, then you create this small paddock of maybe half a hectare, 1 hectare. The cows are here only 1 or 2 days maximum. So then that leaves plenty of time for the soil and the pasture to replenish and to be nutritious. You can even increase the number of animals you have at a farm, and you can have a smaller carbon fingerprint from your farm. So it's a win-win situation. So that was silvopastoral system. Let's talk about now agroforestry systems. So as I was saying, the key to agroforestry is that you mix a lot of things together. See, all these pictures are from the same farm. Doesn't it look like a beautiful garden? So it has bananas, it has coffees. This is a timber tree. The guy planted beans and also planted yucca, and then it has 3 different types of timber trees. And all this within the agricultural landscape. And of course, all of this benefits the coffee, which is his main crop. He also has bees at this farm. So of course, all of this mixture helps the bees to be healthy and to have flowers to go to all along the year, because there's a big limitation here. It rains so much that the bee season is only 3 months during the year. So imagine we can transform the agricultural landscape into something that is really, really productive and yet is very environmentally friendly. And I wanted to quote, we went to this farm 2 days ago. This bean grew and he let it grow over the timber trees. And actually the timber trees are looking beautiful. So that's something that you learn from the farmer. Beans fixate nitrogen and protected the trees. So timber trees are doing much better with the beans than without the beans. So that's something that maybe next year or this year in this planting season, we might try in very degraded areas to plant some of these beans near the trees. So this is a very dynamic program. You learn as you work. Every day, every visit you do, you learn something new. Here are the beehives he has at that farm. So in this farm, what we did, we enriched this forest. Here are the holes where we planted the trees. And of course, the key here was trees that produces a lot of flowers. So let's see crops under secondary forests. As you can see, this is vanilla. I didn't know how vanilla looked like before I came to Costa Rica. Vanilla, it's an orchid and it climbs on the trees. It's easy to grow, but you have to be very delicate in how you grow it and how you harvest. And if you get a good harvest, that could be a better income than cattle, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, some all together. A farmer can get up to $5,000 for a good crop of vanilla. Most of the vanilla we buy at supermarkets is non-natural vanilla. If you look for the natural, you'll see how high the price is. So of course, this is a candidate crop to grow under secondary forests, because these would automatically increase the value of that forest. Here we see it combined with a cocoa crop at a farm we work with. Conservation and ecotourism. So luckily, many farmers, not only expats, but also locals, want to transform their farms into forests, because in the minds of Costa Ricans, the value of forest has increased over the past 40 years. Now it's more valuable to have a farm with forest than to have a degraded farm with pasture. So many of the farms we work with, they just say, okay, I want it all planted with trees. So here you can see some of those examples. And then, of course, there is a lot of ecotourism potential here. There is a big biodiversity for birds. This is a coffee farm called Cofea Diversa on the edge of La Amistad International Park. They have over 700 varieties of coffee. So for coffee lovers, this is heaven. You do like a coffee tasting and all that. And we are enriching their forests and contributing with pollinators trees for their plantation. So As you can see, it's not that we create things. Things are already in place. We are just helping, giving the tools to improve them. That's the key of our project. And then this is super important, tree plantation blocks. Because we want to have timber plantations so people don't have to go into natural forests to harvest wood. And we do timber plantations also with rare trees. So as you can see, this is an area that was planted some years ago with timber trees, but they didn't do well. So we use a species that is a legume species, fast growing. So probably with this bad soil, they would do really well. And then this farmer will have an additional income. And in the process, a lot of carbon will be fixed. As you can see, this farmer preserves the natural forest near the river. So it's a combination of things. We don't want a restoration monoculture, for let's say they call it that way. We want farms that are diverse and use a lot of different things. And in this case, this farm belongs to a coffee processing facility a local coffee processing facility called Copesabalito. So these are the timber trees. In this case, we planted an exotic tree that does really well here and doesn't become invasive. So that's key thing. These trees will be harvested, so they won't stay in nature. And then we combine with firewood trees because these beneficio wants to become carbon neutral. They are applying for a certification. So instead of taking the wood out of forests, they want to take the wood out of their own plantations. And in the process, these are legume trees that will enrich the soil and feed many animals. So farm membership program. Farm membership program is sought for cattle ranches, coffee farms, and palm oil farms. So the idea is that we have some things that we want farmers to do and want to encourage them to do. So in the case of a cattle ranch would be living fences, very important, water distribution systems. So cows don't have to go into rivers or springs or lagoons to drink. We take the water out and we put the water in the paddock. So this is less impact. In the case of coffee, we want to increase the tree cover. We want to put timber trees. We want to increase pollinator bushes in the coffee plantation. And in the case of palm oil, as you can see, this is a very high yield production palm oil plantation, but see how many trees are there in the landscape. So you don't need to have like the unique monoculture. You can have trees that are big that protect the wildlife, and you can also have a crop that produces well for your pocket. And in the process, you're protecting the river and you're serving as a connectivity from this forest here to this other forest. This is the edge of Corcovado National Park. So it's really important that in these buffer areas, we do different productive systems. The idea with this program is that we will give loans to farmers, and then we'll do a study 2 and 5 years down the road and several indicators that is going to tell us how the water quality, how the soil quality, how the biodiversity, how wildlife moving is performing. We're going to create a point system. And if a farmer gets above a certain point system, up to half of the loan can be pardoned. And then, so that's, I think, a very cutting edge program. We're going to start probably this year with a sample of 8 cattle ranches. We want to go slow, so in the process, we can learn how to improve it. There are a lot of microloans programs in the world, but I think there are no microloans programs that are tied to biodiversity improvements at the farm level. So as you can see, these are like indicators that we're going to measure. They have to be clear. They have to be easily measurable. And then depending on the value, then you get different points. And of course, number of trees for pastures, for palm, and for coffee is very different because the nature of those crops are different. What you have seen in all of the presentation, that big farm is owned by this woman here in the middle, Julia Atencio, is going to be one of our pilot farms for the farm membership program. She has a farm over 300 hectares on the Panamanian border, and she has palm oil, she has pastures, and we want to introduce agroforestry. We want to introduce a tree orchard plantation. So it's going to be like a living lab, because that's how we see our project. It's something that we're doing, we're trying out things, and we're seeing how they work out. This is the design for that farm. See how complex this is. So these in brown are the paddocks for adult cows. These in yellow are the paddocks for young cows. These little paddocks is going to be for milk and cheese production. The house is here. In green are the areas that are going to be restored. This is going to be the water distribution system. So you see, restoration is a very complex thing, and it has to be very well thought. We wouldn't be able to do this without our partners, which in this case are the Ministry of Agriculture of Costa Rica and the Cattlemen Chamber of Southwest Costa Rica. So we did the design with them. We proposed to the owner, and of course, she's so happy because with the loan, she'll be able to do this at a very much lower cost that she would have to incur if she would go to a traditional bank system. So this is the talk for today. Thank you so much. I wanted to show you our team. Without them, nothing is possible. These guys really put an effort. You can see I get sentimental because they really put an effort to this. So it's not only us, the technicians, but without these guys, nothing will be possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. I have so many questions in my head, but I first want to open it up to our guests to see if anyone has any questions. I don't see any yet. If you'd like, you can unmute if you have a question. If not, I'll ask. Chad, go ahead.
I was looking for the hand raising function. I think there were several people clapping. Rodrigo, thank you. I want to vote for you for president. I think if the whole world operated the way that this operates, it would be a completely different place. I think this is amazing. I'm at Naples Botanical Garden. We do restoration projects, and some of our challenges that we face right now, and you kind of addressed this, but our seed availability for plants, and then that time lag between planning a project and having the plants available for the project, ensuring that you've got the right plants available. And you work with so many different ecosystems. Can you talk about that a little bit and how you've addressed that and making sure that you've got the right plants available at the time that the project starts?
Thanks for bringing that up. Well, that's impossible because we're working with nature. So the ways we have found and to be close to that is, first, we are building year and after year and improving it, a phenological calendar for the tree species that are key for our nursery. So then we start knowing when we should look at the mother trees, when the seeds are ready. I want to point out that from our seedlings, maybe 30 to 40% of them comes from seeds, but 60% comes from seedlings we collect in the forest. Sometimes we cannot replicate what nature does to germinate seeds. So then we identify areas where we know they're going to be like maybe 1 million seedlings. So if we take 500,000, there will be still 500,000 for nature. So then that has been a big learning process in this project. I remember when I started, the first thing we did was just to take a car and just drive around and then start discovering this. So as you discover more and more and more and more, then you get like a head map on like, okay, where should I go? When should I go? So that's how you do that. But of course, sometimes nature plays tricks. There is this tree that we really like, Cedro Maria, and last year it didn't produce any seeds. But I'm looking now at the trees, and they're like throwing away many young fruits. So I know the production this year is going to be good. Of course, then that's something you cannot control. In the case of oaks, we have found out that one year, one tree produces, and then the next year is a different tree. So then it's ongoing learning process. We have the great help of the botanics team because we do restoration and botanics. So the restoration team, of course, does seed collections, but the botanics team is 24/7 dedicated to monitoring trees and collecting seeds. So that's a big help. And then how do you time seedlings to be ready? It's impossible, especially in the tropics. And especially if you have like pioneer trees like Ochroma pyramidale, which is balsa, in a month, you need to take that out of the nursery. So then the mixtures we take out to the field, of course, depend a lot on what we have at our nurseries. Maybe we would wish for a different mix, but that's not the reality. We do the best mix we can according to our reality. So that's how can we have been able to manage it. There are some species that up till today, we haven't managed to propagate, and we really want to, but that's an ongoing process, I think.
We do have some questions in the chat. Our first question is, how are the plants selected? Does the government, I think you mentioned you work with the farmers to select those plants, but how is that decision made? And then do you use multiple species varieties like for the timber, or is it single species?
Okay, so as for the species selection, when we restore, it depends on the type of restoration, as we saw on the slides. So it depends, say we want to do a riverbank. So there we want to mix some pioneers, some legumes, but we also want to do some interest trees for the producers, and we also want to do some rare trees, because riverbanks, normally the fertility is better, the trees are better protected. So the farm is in location A, so nurseries 1 and 2 are the ones that will supply the trees to that farm. So then we look and see what we have at those nurseries. We do the counting with the stakes. So then, okay, we will plant here 1,345 trees. And then we do a list on the distribution with in the species. We bring the species to the farm. We do like a mini nursery. And then in baskets, we'll do the mix. We put the species together by groups. And then in the basket, say each basket holds 15 trees. So we say, okay, 3 pioneers, 4 legumes, 2 rare, 3 of interest. And so that's kind of how the process goes. In the species selection, the farmer participates, but of course, we take a big role into that. There was a second question that I forgot, sorry.
Yeah, when like earlier you were talking about planting timber. When you're planting timber, do you use just one species or multiple species?
So that depends on the farm. Our favorite approach is to use multiple species. Why? Because then the harvesting horizon for the farmer increases. So if we plant short-term trees, medium-term trees, long-term trees, then the farmer will be able to collect timber from year 8 until year 80. If we only plant one tree, one species, then everything has to be harvested between, say, year 8 and 12. But that depends on the farmer, because that's more a productive activity than a restoration activity.
Beautiful. Okay, our next question is, was it difficult to get the farmers involved in the project? Which were the prejudices you had to overcome?
Okay, good question. So a while ago, we looked back and said, how have we been able to be so successful? You saw our team. We are 3 guys in this huge landscape. So how are we successful? So we think a key thing is having alliances. If I go to a cattle ranch by myself representing an environmental NGO, of course, the rancher will look at me like, I don't know. But if I go there with the vet guy from the cattle ranch chamber that has saved maybe 5 of his cows, I'm entering through a different door. So he's more open, he's more willing to talk with us, he's more willing to listen to ideas. He knows we are not crazy people, we are reasonable people, and And then he knows that this is not only about conservation, but this is also about improving livelihoods. But if we go with the vet guy, he will believe us. You know, well, you're Colombian, so you know in Latin America, who you go with, it's a key thing, more than a CV or something you post. So I think that has been, most of the farms we are working with are through local alliances or national alliances we have, either communities or communal organizations, or maybe a farmer worked with us and then he recommended us to a different farmer. Last year, we got to a point when sometimes we got WhatsApp messages from unknown people that were interested to learn about our project. One key thing is to be responsible and to deliver what you say you were going to deliver, and to say what you cannot deliver, but try and help for that to be delivered by someone else. So I think it's building that trust relationship. That's how you overcome the prejudice. Of course, we have had farms that have backed up from the project, but we have maybe 300 farms in our network. And I think we have had maybe 7 to 9 farms that have backed up. So I think we have been very successful. I think the key thing is when you go there and you're honest and you're willing to listen to them, because I think that's a big mistake many NGOs make. They feel they have like the magic wand in their hands, and that's not true. You need to explore and work with them, and then in that way, I think they respect you more and they appreciate you more, and then you start building those relationships, which are really valuable for restoration. So I think that's how we have done it.
Yeah, that relationship building is vital, not just with the farmers, but yeah, with the other organizations that can help you get you through the door.
Exactly.
Okay, our next question is, do you have problems with exotic plants when you're planting?
Okay, the problem we have with the pastures, those are exotic. Those are varieties that were probably produced in Colombia or Brazil, and the seed was brought to Costa Rica. So that's the biggest problem we have. In some secondary forests, we have some invasive species under forest floor. Then that makes a little more difficult for our trees to grow. But it's not like a huge issue. It's very, luckily, it's only in very few places. Most secondary forests we go to have the native species. So then the trees can go really well with those palm and those ferns or those gingers. So it's not a huge problem.
All right, and our last question, it's a long question. If you need to open the chat to see it, you can.
Okay.
Okay, are seed dormancy experiments performed to develop a higher germination success rate on more difficult to grow species?
Okay. We would like to do more science, but we have very little time for science because we're always like running, because our goals are like huge. We need to plant 100,000 trees, and in a landscape that it's so diverse that it's difficult to access. So that's a huge challenge. We have done some non-formal experiments with some seeds. And so we have tried out very simple things, but under a different grant, which is for the Botanics program, there is a specific component for this. So this is something that we're gonna work with for the rare and endangered species, especially, because that's why they're rare or threatened, because they have difficulties reproducing. Most of the trees we use for restoration are super easy to germinate and propagate. And the ones that we had a little problem, we found a way out. So for example, with oaks, it was super simple. Just soak them in water one day. And then the seed hydrates, and then they sprout. And this was taught to us by a nursery, one of our nursery managers, with a man that is maybe 60 years old. So he has like a lot of local knowledge. And we were like, banging our heads against the wall, like, how do we do this? And he was like, so simple, one day in water, and then just put it in a shade cloth. Don't put it in the soil, a shade cloth. And when they start germinating, then put them in the bags. So sometimes solutions are very simple, but for some species, especially magnolias, we are finding a big challenge of how to reproduce them. As Maria Jose says, she's the coordinator for the Botanics program. it's a species that wants to go extinct, because it's like it doesn't produce seeds, and if it produces the seeds, then they're not viable. So it's like we try to do a sexual propagation, and it's like very complex. So yeah, to answer specifically the question, we are intent to do experiments in the future, and actually that's one of the things I became part of this network. I'm gonna start doing visits to gardens in order to start working on this together.
I think that was the perfect spot to end on. You know, cultivating those relationships, using expertise that's already out there. You mentioned earlier, in working with some of these farmers, sometimes they come up with solutions or they see growth that you hadn't seen, and you can start implementing that into new projects as well. So that's the importance of
Uh-oh, it looks like Lena froze up.
Yes, it is.
oh, am I freezing?
You're back.
I guess I'll make the goodbye quick so I don't lose myself again. I wanted to thank you all again for being here, being part of our network, formally or informally. We'll be doing these series of tech talks every quarter. And I hope you guys have more questions for Rodrigo. His email is on the original flyer that we sent out, and you can reach him there with any additional questions. Feel free to reach out to myself at the Naples Botanical Garden. My name is Lena Ramirez. Thank you all for joining. We have recorded this, so we'll send it out as well to everybody that was registered for the talk, and then feel free to share it out from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rodrigo.
No worries. Bye-bye.